If you're familiar with the previous CSS videos we made, I'm going to be reusing the same shape. I've added a fake element for styling purposes in here just to make it flex and remove all of the gaps that was in between the divs. As for the rest, it's pretty much the same, and what we're going to do now is look at zero selectors. I'm not going to add any HTML further to this thing, but I do want to add some additional shapes and styling content to this, just purely out of CSS, and that is what we're going to be looking at next. There are two selectors we're going to be looking at in particular. The first one is before and the second one is after. They're basically the same thing, but let's just go and see what these things do. To define a before and after zero selector, you need to take the query that you want to use normally. So take your selector and then just add a colon before and a colon after on it. And now all of a sudden you can add two additional pieces of content to the UI. Now both of these require a content property to be set. In this case I'm saying before, and here I'm putting an after, but later on we'll remove it. It's just really important to stress the point that that property has to be there whether or not you want to show a value in there or not. Looking at our form, you can see here we have the word before and then the word after. And if we go to our first element in the dev tools, you can see I have this before and the after. And now we're at a point where we can add some functionality to it. But what I want to do is place both the before and after inside of this, the sizing and the scope and the bounds of my element, which means that I need to absolutely position it. So before we can do that, we need to go and set this element's position to be relative so that this inside of it can be set to absolute. Since we want to potentially do that on all of the divs within this particular visualization, all I'm going to do is use the most common query for it and say, okay, I want all my divs to have a position of relative. And now, because this is relative, I can start adding position absolute on my before and after. And since we're here, let's just quickly add it. So position is absolute and position is absolute. And there's one more thing that I want to add before we continue, which will make more sense when I actually start using it, is a variable with the name of size, and I want this to be 50 pixels. Okay, let's go and play with this in the browser. Once we refresh it, you can see now that the word before and after is all squished up together in the top left hand corner of our element. And if I hover over there, you can see it's right within the bound, so it's absolutely positioned at 0, 0, which is good for what we want to do. However, I don't want that text there, so I'm going to give it an empty string. And I don't want that text there, so I'm going to give that an empty string as well, just to take the words away, because what I'm going to do now is actually draw some shapes on the before and the after. Let's do the before first. What we want to do is say, okay, I want to draw a shape that is horizontally in the middle. For the size that I have defined, and I want to give it a color of yellow. So let's say that the background is yellow, and we say that the width is equal to our variable, which is size, and our height is equal to the variable, which is size. And now we have a yellow rectangle at the top, and if I go to the size property, then I can change it to be whatever size I want to, but this is fine for now. Now the next thing is I want to put it in the middle. Now that's going to be a little bit more complicated, because I can say that the top is equal to 50%, but hang on, that's not in the middle. It means that the top of the rectangle is now at the middle of it, and that's not what I want. So I can do a bit of a calculation here using the calc function. So I can say calculate for me 50% minus the variable called size divided by 2. And now it is in the middle. And I want the left to be 10 pixels to the right. So I'm just going to say I want 10 pixels on my left. And now we can start playing with the borders and the stuff that we've known before. So we can say, all right, the border dash radius that we want to use here is 50%, 0, 0, 50%. And I want to have a border that is, let's say, 5 pixels, solid, and yellow. Now, since our background is yellow, we can't see that, but I can take that off and replace this background with something that is maybe just a little bit more blingy. So there's our before that we've added to our first class, and we can go and do the same thing. Let's just copy that quickly into our after. Let's see if I can remove this easily. Apparently not, so we'll just do it the hard way. Now in this case I'm saying, okay, well, I don't want it to be on the left. I want it to be on the right hand side. I don't want to have this border on it. I don't want my border radius on there either. I just want to have a rectangle. And this rectangle, I want to go and change the width to be equal to my size, but I want to double the size. So I can use my calc function here again to say, calculate for me my size times 2. Okay, now you'll see, oopsie daisy, I've got that sizing issue again. Why? Because on my before I'm using the border, but my box sizing isn't set to border box. So we set that to border box, and now it aligns nicely. And so I can go forth and add 2 additional pieces of visualizations, UI shapes, using the before and after pseudo selectors. But I can still refine this a little bit by bringing common things together in the shape of a variable to make this even better. Here is my code. So what of this code can I actually go and wrap into a variable that I don't currently have? Well, this over there is the same as what this calculation is over there, so that can go into a variable. We also have this border radius that we're repeating in various places. So if I wanted to change the border radius, I don't want it to be quite as round, maybe I can have that in a variable. And so just because the code is done doesn't mean that you're done. You need to go and have a look through your CSS and say, okay, well, how can I clean this up? How can I neaten this up? How can I buy myself a little bit more flexibility by potentially placing these things into variables? Now, you can go overboard with variables as well, and I don't recommend you do that. But think clearly and soberly about it. Are you repeating a whole bunch of stuff? Might you want to change some of those properties in the future? And how much work maintaining that variances will it be? And then lastly, would you want to enable your users to change the look and feel of your component? And if the answer is yes, variables is definitely what you want to consider. To demonstrate this, I went and created a radius left variable that has our 50%, 0, 0, 50%, and then I've gone and added it to the first class and also the before. Now that they're together, let's go and see what happens if I change that in the browser. Here's our variable. Currently it's sitting at 50%. What if I made it 25%? Now, just by changing that one property in a variable, I can see, oh, well, hang on. Both this internal item and also the element itself is now changing shape. And I can do the same over here, and so let's make that 25%. Well, now it starts to look a little bit more like a pencil. And you can start playing with those borders and get all kinds of very cool effects going with it. The bottom line of it is that those variables allow me that one place that I can make a change that then reflects throughout all of my items, whether it be the pseudo elements or the element itself. The other important lesson here is this. You don't have to go and create a bazillion divs just because your UI happens to have a lot of items in it. Think clearly as to how you can optimize that using your before and after selectors.